Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. Obviously, a very important hearing, something that we are very interested in this committee. As we've discussed many times before in this committee, this administration's EPA is doing everything it can to force through a premature energy transition. Nearly 60% of our nation's energy comes from natural gas and coal. Yet EPA's proposed Clean Power Plan 2.0 rule will require this generation source to use carbon capture and hydrogen technologies that not only simply are not economical or operational yet, but increase the cost to provide power to customers. This is something we are very concerned with. This is something I'm very concerned with in my district and in my state, my home state of Georgia. I had the opportunity to travel to Europe with the Conservative Climate Caucus, and one of the things that I discovered in Europe is that they have made the era of allowing their policies to come before their innovation. And that's something we need to learn. It's a very important lesson we need to learn here in America, that we can't let that happen, yet we are seeing it happen, primarily through the rulings of the EPA. If we do that, we allow we sacrifice, I should say, our energy security and our reliability. Ms. Owenby, I want to ask you, according to FERC Commissioner Mark Christie, the U.S. is already not building enough pipelines to transport sufficient amounts of gas to maintain steady and reliable supply of electricity without the additional regulatory burden on power plants. With the CCUS requirements of this rule, what is going to happen to the cost and reliability of energy in states like Tennessee or Georgia that don't have the associated infrastructure to pump out CO2?
Thank you for the question. I think Tennessee's issue will be twofold. One, we've got units that are in places where we don't necessarily have appropriate storage for carbon capture and sequestration. So we'll have a storage issue, which means then we have a transport issue, right? We've got to get that CO2 somewhere. And as I said in my comments, there's just not a pipeline that's adequate, and there's not an infrastructure for that pipeline. When we look at our natural gas pipeline, it's regulated by FERC. There's been a lot of congressional actions that have allowed those pipelines, as hard as they are to build, to have somewhat of a streamlining, if you may. That reality doesn't exist in the CO2 world. You don't have a federal agency that's in charge of siting those pipelines, and you don't have federal eminent domain.
Well, let me ask you this. In the scenario in which you describe, what's going to be the impact on cost? And what's going to be the impact to the customer? And what's going to be the impact on reliability?
So I think in the reality where you're looking at either investing in those technologies that will be incredibly expensive and trying to put in that infrastructure, if that's what the utilities choose to do, or you look at limiting the capacity factor, either way, you're looking at raising costs to energy to our consumers. And in Tennessee, we've got 8 distressed counties and 27 at-risk counties. EPA's CGES tool, which helps us identify disadvantaged communities, show that we have 46% census tracts, or 46% of our census tracts are disadvantaged communities.
Right.
And so for us, we have our large metro areas, but we have a big rural state.
Sure. Same thing in Georgia. I say it all the time. There are 2 Georgias. There's Atlanta and everywhere else. Exactly. And everywhere else is going to suffer, I'm going to tell you.
Exactly.
Well, Mr. Glatt, let me ask you, do you think the proposed carbon rule is harmful or helpful to the deployment of CCS?
It would be harmful because it would limit innovation. Why would any industry invest in innovation moving forward if they don't have a future?
So if they're not going to invest in that, where do you think they're going to invest?
Good question.
Yeah, exactly. And where are we going to get power from? Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Glatt. How would the U.S.'s ability to be competitive and power our economy, how is it going to impact that?
In many ways, energy is not only used for residential, but it's used in our state for agriculture. And so by having unreliable energy, expensive energy, it's going to impact everything across the board throughout the economy.
Absolutely. It's going to impact the ability to attract businesses as well. You know, for 11 years in a row, the state of Georgia has been the #1 state in the nation to do business. One of the reasons why is because of our low energy costs and our availability of energy. If that goes away, then we're not going to be able to attract businesses like we have been. So thank you all again for being here. I appreciate it, and I yield back.
Gentlemen, you